Two big stages. Two big targets. Two gunmen ready to kill. Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump were targeted by supposedly amateur hitmen in two of the most shocking assassination attempts in recent American history. The outcomes could not have been more different, but the circumstances surrounding each event were eerily similar. We're going to put both crime scenes under a microscope, dig into the details of each shooting, and uncover how they're shifting the course of American politics. In this episode of Photo Evidence. Charlie Kirk was a conservative commentator, activist, and co-founder of Turning Point USA, an organization that aimed to promote conservative politics among young Americans. On September 10, 2025, the 31-year-old was at Utah Valley University campus in the town of Orem, here. This was one of 15 planned stops on a university campus speaking tour titled American Comeback. Here is a view of the scene. Kirk was seated under a canopy tent, here, with unrestricted lines of sight to the surrounding buildings. He was effectively seated pride of place in a sunken amphitheater in front of a crowd of 3,000 people. The shooter, who we'll come on to later, was atop this structure, the Losi Center. This four-story building is a university admin hub and is generally open to the public. Investigators combing the scene in the hours after the shooting established that the shooter opened fire from this position. Here, you can see the imprints his prone body left in the grit covering the roof. Cross-referencing this image with this map, we can estimate the shooter was positioned roughly 426 feet away from Kirk. That's 130 meters. The shooter had an unobstructed line of sight to his target, sitting under this tent here. In this image of the event, you can see the environmental conditions for the shot were ideal. Clear, blue, sunny skies, and low wind. This here is the site of Kirk's killing in Orem. The attempt on Donald Trump's life took place at the other end of the country in Butler, Pennsylvania, some 1,657 miles away from the UVU campus. But the fundamental variables were much the same. Trump, then presumptive Republican presidential nominee, came under fire here at the Butler Farm Showgrounds on July 13, 2024. Butler, a fiercely Republican city, was seen as a safe and highly supportive stop on the campaign trail for Trump as he sought to usurp incumbent President Joe Biden. But security was extremely lax. Like Kirk, Trump took to an open-air stage, facing a legion of fans piled into the center of the field. He also had rows of people behind him. Little did he know his would-be assassin, 20-year-old engineering student Thomas Matthew Crooks, was lying in wait. Crooks was positioned on the roof of this building here, a warehouse belonging to American Glass Research, or AGR International. This building was located outside the perimeter fence, and, like the Losi Center in Utah, was publicly accessible. Crooks gained access to the roof using the air conditioning unit, located in an interior lawn at the AGR facility here, after a chain of errors by local law enforcement and the Secret Service. More on this later. The distance from Crooks's position on the roof and Trump's podium was about 430 feet, or 131 meters. This is almost identical to the range of the lethal shot that killed Charlie Kirk. Just like Kirk's assassin, Crooks had an unobstructed line of sight to the Republican and was shooting down from high ground, albeit with a smaller angle of elevation. And, just like in Utah, the weather was calm, with low winds and blue skies. So, we've established that the conditions for both attacks were almost like for like. Now it's time to compare the attacks themselves. Kirk took to the stage in Utah at 12 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time to hold a Prove Me Wrong event, where crowd members can challenge the speaker to a short debate on a topic of their choosing. Sitting under this white branded awning, he begins his talk shortly after 12 p.m. At 12:23 p.m., the gunman lying on the roof of the Losi Center fires a single surgical shot. You can see here how the bullet struck Kirk in the left side of his neck. It left a large entry wound and tore through his vital arteries, causing rapid, catastrophic blood loss that ultimately sealed his fate. Here you can see people carrying Kirk's limp body away from the scene. He was rushed to hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. Investigators say the alleged murder weapon is a bolt-action rifle manufactured by Mauser. This is a popular weapon with hunters because it's designed to fire a large projectile at a velocity high enough to cut through the vital organs of a large animal. This rifle is chambered to shoot rounds like these, 7.62. In the US, this specific round is known as a 30-06. 30 refers to the diameter in inches, 0.30, and 06 refers to the year it was adopted by the US Army, 1906. These are large bullets that do a good job of retaining their energy and resisting the impact of wind. Let's take another look at the crime scene. At a distance of 130 meters, and with a stable, prone shooting position like this one, any civilian shooter with modest training would likely be able to make a precision shot. This high-velocity bullet would have been traveling at roughly 800 meters a second as it left the barrel of the Mauser, with huge destructive potential. That means it would have taken just 0.16 seconds to reach Kirk 130 meters away. In other words, Kirk didn't stand a chance of surviving. Here is another picture of some 7.62 caliber ammo, this time alongside another widely used kind of bullet, the 5.56. These cartridges are considerably lighter and smaller. That's because they are fired by semi-automatic rifles, commonly referred to as AR-15s or AR pattern rifles. These images, released by the FBI, show the weapon used by would-be assassin Thomas Crooks in his attempt on Trump's life. This is a DPMS A-15. It's modular, light, and easy to assemble and disassemble. It also supports a range of accessories, such as this optical sight. But most importantly, it's designed to sustain a high rate of fire. Unlike the Mauser, which requires its user to manually operate this bolt to load a new cartridge into the firing chamber after each shot, this weapon is capable of firing round after round with each pull of the trigger. Essentially, it trades outright force and power for the ability to deliver multiple hits in quick succession. This is exactly the kind of tactic Crooks used when he opened fire on Trump. He fired 8 shots in a total of just 6 seconds at 6:11 p.m. One of these shots hit its intended target, but as we know, the man who went on to become the 47th President of the United States was left with nothing but a lightly pierced ear. This miraculous escape was put down to a perfectly timed turn of the head, which pulled the contents of his skull out of the path of the bullet at the last moment. Unfortunately, Corey Comparatore, a fireman who was sitting in the crowd behind Trump, was not so lucky. He was killed by one of Crooks's wayward shots. Now, the A-15 rifle may not be fully optimized for accuracy and precision like the Mauser, but at 131 meters, pretty much the same range as the Kirk shooting, it is more than capable of highly accurate fire in the hands of a competent gunman. In August 2023, almost a year before his ill-fated assassination attempt on Trump, Crooks took out a membership here, the Clairton Sportsman's Club in Jefferson Hills, Pennsylvania. This club has a rifle range of 200 yards, or 180 meters, more than enough for Crooks to practice for his 131-meter kill shot. Here's an image of the club's logbook, dated May the 22nd, 2024, less than 2 months before the Trump rally on July the 13th. Here, you can see that Thomas Crooks registered for rifle practice. Authorities later discovered Crooks had made more than 40 visits to the Clairton Sportsman's Club in the 12 months leading up to the rally, getting hours and hours of practice. So why did he fail to deliver a kill shot? We'll never know for sure, but there were at least 2 key factors that complicated Crooks's task. First, the geometry of the rooftop. Instead of a flat, rifle-friendly firing platform atop the Losee Center in Utah, Crooks was shooting at Trump from the far side of a sloped roof, with a ridge in the middle. That roof profile would have made it very awkward to maintain a stable shooting position. Second, pressure. Charlie Kirk was a prominent and divisive figure, but he wasn't running for a stint in the Oval Office. That meant he had a limited security detail, and his assassin faced no armed resistance. Trump, meanwhile, was surrounded by a close personal protection team and Secret Service snipers. There were 2 sniper teams in particular that posed a serious threat to Crooks. One team, positioned here on the northernmost roof of this barn, were the closest to Crooks, but their view of his spot on top of the AGR building was partially obstructed by these trees. Another team, on the southernmost roof, here, had a clear view of Crooks's building, but he was partially concealed below the ridgeline of the sloped roof. Even so, Crooks knew he could have been spotted and engaged at any moment, so it was likely a combination of poor positioning and mental strain, not to mention a healthy amount of dumb luck. that led crooks to failure. Change a single one of these factors, and Donald Trump's second presidential term may never have materialized. Back in Utah, at 12:23 p.m., the thousands of people watching Charlie Kirk on stage heard a loud crack. Then they saw his lifeless body falling backwards with blood gushing from his neck. The shot triggered pandemonium as almost every single crowd member realized there was an active shooter and ran for their lives. This recording appears to show a figure standing on the roof of the Losi Center moments after the shot. The video cuts out moments later as the attendees run for cover. But they needn't have bothered, because the shooter was running too. Security camera footage showed him running across the roof of the Losi Center at 12:24 p.m., less than a minute after the shot, before hanging down and dropping onto the turf below. If you look closely, he appears to be holding something wrapped in a black cover. This is thought to be the weapon. From there, he hightailed it across this road here, called Campus Drive, and into the wooded area on the other side. This is where investigators are said to have found the Mauser, wrapped up in the bushes. This brings us to the shooter himself. The investigation into Kirk's murder is still ongoing, and it's moving quickly. But this is what we know at the time of the filming. Investigators say their prime suspect for the shooting is Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old from Utah's Washington County. It's not yet clear exactly how he managed to evade law enforcement officials in the wake of the shooting, but he is thought to have driven to his parents' home in Washington, roughly 260 miles from the UVU campus in Orem. Security camera footage taken hours before the shooting showed a grey Dodge Challenger linked to Robinson driving by the campus. That car later appeared to be sitting in a parking lot by the Robinson family home in Washington County here. This is where Tyler was reportedly confronted by his father, Matt Robinson, who recognized his son in these images of the suspect released by the FBI. Tyler is then said to have confessed to his dad. He was finally arrested 33 hours after the shooting, when a family friend alerted the authorities. Utah Governor Spencer Cox told the press that Robinson is refusing to cooperate, but that his friends and family were helping with the investigation. This is a copy of the Utah County Sheriff's Office affidavit related to Robinson's arrest. It laid out 3 initial charges: aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, and obstruction of justice. It also showed Robinson would not be granted bail due to the severity of his alleged crimes. Then, on Tuesday, September the 16th, Robinson was formally charged while being held at the Utah County Jail. Prosecutors added 4 more charges. These included another count of obstruction of justice for disposing of his clothing, and 2 counts of witness tampering related to communication with his roommate, Lance Twiggs. Twiggs is a biological male who is transitioning. They're in a relationship with Robinson. These text exchanges, provided to investigators, appear to show Robinson confessing Kirk's murder to his partner. Here, Robinson seemingly explains how he hid the rifle after the shooting, and wanted to go back to collect it to avoid leaving evidence. It also appears to shed light on a possible motivation for the shooting. Robinson told his transgender partner how he was sick of Kirk's hatred, adding that it can't be negotiated out. And in these final messages, Robinson appears to instruct Twiggs to stay silent. This is what led prosecutors to add charges of witness tampering. Robinson attended his court hearing remotely from Utah County Jail. When asked to state his name, he responded,
Tyler James Robinson.
Those were the only words he said. The dark green sleeveless gown he is wearing is a suicide prevention smock. This is made of thick, tear-resistant material that cannot be rolled or folded into a noose. This prevents its wearer from hanging themselves in their cell. It's also free of any zips, wires, or cords that could be used for self-harming. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray confirmed he will seek the death penalty if Robinson is convicted. The aftermath of Trump's shooting was chaotic and iconic in equal measure. A split second after Crooks's bullet clipped his ear, Trump raised his hand to the site of the wound. You can see the moment it dawned on him that he was under fire, and he ducked down to avoid the oncoming brass. Secret Service detail then surged onto the stage and threw their bodies between Trump and the shooter. A few moments later, while his security team were trying to hustle him to safety, Trump made the move that arguably won him the presidency. With blood trickling down his ear, he raised a clenched fist high above the agents and began chanting a single word to the crowd: fight. These images instantly immortalized him as a hero in the eyes of his supporters. But by the time Trump started playing to the crowd, events on the roofline had already reached their own violent conclusion. Secret Service sniper teams, already locked onto Thomas Crooks's position atop the AGR building, opened fire. Their shots were precise and deliberate. One of the first rounds struck Crooks's rifle, damaging the buttstock, as you can see here. Crooks was then torn apart by a hail of bullets. This is a copy of his autopsy report. The official cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, but here you can read just how destructive the sniper's fire was. Crooks's skull and face were torn apart, with bullets smashing apart his jaw and teeth, tearing through his carotid artery and jugular vein, and ripping through his upper back. Pictures taken at the scene of his death showed a thick trail of blood running down the sloped roof coming from Crooks's corpse. When law enforcement moved in to secure the rooftop, they discovered a radio transmitter on Crooks's body, sparking fears that there could be an explosive device planted at the rally. Fortunately, no bombs were found at the scene. But shortly after midnight, on July 14th, investigators tracked down Crooks's car, parked along Whitestown Road, close to the AGR building from which he shot Trump. This image, taken by the Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD team, shows the contents of Crooks's car. Inside, investigators found an improvised explosive device, or IED, a drone, and an ammunition box filled with an unconfirmed substance with a radio receiver attached to it. This could well have been another explosive. Bomb disposal teams destroyed these devices, and with that, the threat was over. But then came the next question. How was Crooks ever able to get his shots off in the first place? On December 5th, a month after Trump storms to victory in the 2024 presidential race, the House of Representatives issued a report from a task force assembled to investigate this debacle. The results were damning. First, it found that several local law enforcement officers and a sniper from Butler's Emergency Services Unit, or ESU, noticed Crooks acting suspiciously as early as 5 p.m. Then, at 5:10 p.m., another sniper spotted Crooks using a rangefinder. He sent a text message to alert his colleagues at 5:15 p.m. In other words, law enforcement officers and local snipers had both identified Crooks as a possible threat more than an hour before the shooting. They also learned that the threat was likely credible when he pulled out a rangefinder. At 5:38 p.m., one of the Butler snipers sent pictures of Crooks to a group of colleagues and encouraged them to notify Secret Service snipers. A flurry of communication between local law enforcement and the Secret Service followed, yet somehow they lost Crooks. He was able to retrieve his weapon and clamber on top of the AGR building at 6:08 p.m. Finally, between 6:09 and 6:11, a police officer even climbed onto the roof of the AGR building and came face to face with Crooks. At this point, Crooks already had his gun assembled and trained towards the rally. The police officer testified that Crooks pointed the gun at him, causing him to fall off the roof to avoid being shot. He called in the sighting and alerted colleagues via his radio that there was a shooter with a long gun. Yet somehow, nobody was able to stop Crooks from getting shots away, one of which grazed Trump's ear, and another of which killed Corey Comparatore. Unsurprisingly, the task force's conclusion was unambiguous. It found that Crooks's attempted assassination was tragic and preventable, and the litany of related security failures unacceptable. It also argued that lawmakers should seek to address important questions around the motivations of Thomas Crooks and other would-be assassins to prevent such tragic events from reoccurring. Perhaps now, with the ruthless assassination of Charlie Kirk on a university campus, lawmakers might finally sit up and take notice.